When Barron Trump gave up his first-class seat to an elderly veteran, no one expected the stunning family secret that would unfold mid-flight. What happened next left the entire plane speechless. The soft murmur of passengers boarding the plane filled the air, but all eyes turned to a striking scene near the first-class cabin. Barron Trump, known to the world as a figure of privilege, stood calmly in front of a man in a worn military jacket, his hands trembling slightly as he clutched a tattered boarding pass. The man's face carried lines of exhaustion, but his eyes held quiet pride of veteran, returning home after decades of service. "Sir, this is your seat," the flight attendant said politely, motioning to Barron. Barron didn't move. Instead, he studied the veteran for a moment longer, his expression thoughtful. Then, in a voice steady yet kind, he said, "No. It's his seat now." The cabin fell silent, a collective gasp echoing among the passengers. The world might know Barron Trump as the son of one of the most powerful families in the country, but no one had expected this. Before I reveal what happened next, and trust me, it's something no one on that flight could believe, make sure you hit subscribe to never miss these incredible, real-life stories that inspire and challenge us to think differently. The veteran hesitated, his hand shaking as he tried to refuse. "I can't take your seat, son. It's yours." Barron smiled gently, stepping aside. "You've already given so much to this country. Let me do this one small thing for you." As the veteran settled into the plush first-class seat, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. A quiet buzz spread, with whispers of admiration and confusion. But what no one realized at that moment was that Barron's simple act of kindness was just the beginning of a chain of events that would take an unimaginable turn. The flight attendant, visibly moved, approached Barron. "Mr. Trump, are you sure about this? We can find another way to accommodate him." Barron shook his head, his voice calm yet firm. "I'm sure. He deserves it more than I do." But as Barron walked toward the economy cabin, a shadowy figure at the back of the plane watched him closely, his expression dark and calculating. Unbeknownst to everyone on board, something far bigger than an act of kindness was unfolding, something that would leave them all questioning what they truly knew about the people around them. As Barron took his new seat in the crowded economy section, whispers followed him. Passengers craned their necks to get a glimpse of the young man who had just given up the luxury of first class without a second thought. A mother sitting nearby nudged her teenage son. "See that? That's what real character looks like," she whispered. Barron, however, seemed unfazed by the attention. He quietly slipped into his seat, pulling out a book and flipping it open as though nothing unusual had happened. But his mind was restless, replaying the look of surprise and gratitude on the veteran's face. Meanwhile, in first class, the veteran sat awkwardly in the oversized seat, his hands fidgeting with the armrests. The passengers around him began offering their respect. Some shook his hand. Others thanked him for his service. One woman even leaned over and said, "You deserve this more than anyone here." But in the midst of the gratitude, an uneasy feeling began to creep over him. His eyes darted toward the back of the plane, where Barron was sitting, and then toward the aisle, where a man in a dark hoodie and sunglasses was standing, pretending to adjust his luggage. The man's behavior was strange, his movements deliberate, his gaze focused intently on Barron. "Excuse me," the veteran called softly to a flight attendant. "Do you know who that young man is?" The flight attendant gave a polite smile. "That's Barron Trump," she said quietly, glancing toward the back of the plane. "He's a remarkable young man, isn't he?" The veteran's heart skipped a beat. He had heard the name, of course, but he hadn't connected it to the teenager who had just shown him such kindness. His instincts, honed from years in the military, told him to stay alert. Something about the man in the hoodie didn't sit right. At that moment, the man moved. He walked slowly down the aisle, his hand slipping into the pocket of his jacket. Barron didn't notice he was engrossed in his book, completely unaware of the growing tension. The veteran stood up abruptly, catching the attention of everyone in first class. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm. He made his way toward the economy section, his eyes locked on the man in the hoodie. But before he could reach Barron, the man stopped suddenly, turning to face the veteran with a smirk. "Looks like you've still got sharp instincts, old man," he muttered under his breath. The veteran froze, his heart pounding. The man leaned in closer and whispered, "But trust me, you're not going to like what's coming next." Before anyone could react, the man turned and continued walking, disappearing toward the back of the plane. The veteran stood there for a moment, his pulse racing. Something wasn't right, something far bigger than he had anticipated was unfolding, and Barron Trump was at the center of it. The veteran didn't hesitate. He moved quickly to where Barron was sitting, his military instincts fully engaged. "Son," he said quietly, placing a firm hand on Barron's shoulder. "We need to talk." Barron looked up, startled by the urgency in the man's voice. "Is everything okay?" he asked, closing his book. "Not yet," the veteran replied, glancing back down the aisle where the man in the hoodie had vanished. "But I need you to stay alert. Something's off." Barron tilted his head slightly, confusion mixing with curiosity. "Off? What do you mean?" The veteran hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Let's just say that guy in the hoodie isn't here for the in-flight snacks," he muttered. Meanwhile, the atmosphere on the plane shifted subtly. A few passengers noticed the veteran's tense demeanor and began whispering among themselves. The flight attendants, sensing the change, started moving more cautiously up and down the aisles, their smiles faltering. Barron leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Do you think he's a threat?" The veteran nodded. "Something doesn't add up. The way he was watching you, it wasn't random. I've seen that look before, and it never ends well." Before Barron could respond, the plane's intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a minor technical issue, but there's no cause for alarm. Please remain seated while we sort this out." The words were meant to calm, but they only added to the tension. Barron exchanged a glance with the veteran. "Do you think this is connected?" he asked, his voice steady despite the unease in his eyes. "It might be," the veteran admitted, his jaw tightening. "We need to stay ahead of whatever's coming." Just then, a loud commotion erupted from the back of the plane. A flight attendant's voice rose sharply, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Passengers turned in their seats, craning their necks to see what was happening. The veteran moved instinctively, signaling Barron to stay put. "Don't move," he instructed firmly. "If something goes wrong, you stay out of sight." Barron, however, wasn't the type to sit idly by. "If it's me he's after, I'm not hiding," he said, standing up. The veteran gave him a sharp look. "This isn't a negotiation, son. You've already done something good today by giving up your seat. Now, let me do what I was trained for." But before either of them could act, the man in the hoodie reappeared, stepping into the aisle with a sinister grin. In his hand was a small, unassuming device that made the veteran's blood run cold. "All right, folks," the man announced loudly, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Time to change the flight plan." Gasps erupted across the cabin, and the tension reached a boiling point. Barron and the veteran locked eyes, both realizing that the situation had just escalated into something far more dangerous than either of them could have imagined. The cabin plunged into silence as passengers stared at the man in the hoodie, their faces frozen in fear. The device in his hand wasn't large, but the threat it carried was enough to terrify everyone. "Listen up," the man said, his voice sharp and commanding. "Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. This flight is under my control now." The veteran's fists clenched as he studied the man. Years of experience told him that the device was likely a bluff too small to be as dangerous as the man wanted them to believe. But there was no room for error. One wrong move and innocent people could get hurt. Barron remained calm, though his mind raced. He wasn't just thinking about himself, he was thinking about everyone else on the plane. He leaned toward the veteran and whispered, "What do we do?" The veteran's voice was steady but low. "We wait for the right moment." He's expecting fear, not resistance. The man in the hoodie paced the aisle slowly, enjoying the power he held over the terrified passengers. His eyes scanned the rows, but they kept darting back to Barron. It was clear that Barron was his target, though his motives remained unclear. Now, the man continued, "Stopping near Barron's row, I need everyone to cooperate. That includes you." He pointed the device directly at Barron, who didn't flinch. The veteran stood slightly, blocking the man's view of Barron. "Leave him alone," he said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced danger countless times. The man's eyes narrowed. "Ah, the hero. Every plane's got one, huh? Sit down, old man, before I make an example out of you. I'd like to see you try, the veteran replied, his tone unwavering. Tension crackled in the air as passengers watched the standoff. The flight attendants huddled near the front, clearly unsure of how to intervene. But then, in an unexpected move, Barron stepped forward, his expression calm but resolute. "If it's me you're after, let's end this here," he said. The man smirked, clearly amused by Barron's bravery. "Oh, you're bold, I'll give you that," he said. "But boldness won't save you." Barron's voice didn't waver. "And arrogance won't save you. You think you're in control, but you're not." The man's smirk faltered slightly, and the veteran seized the moment. With lightning speed, he lunged forward, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it until the device clattered to the floor. The man shouted in pain, but the veteran didn't let up, pinning him against the seat with impressive strength. Passengers gasped, some shouting encouragement, while others called for help. The commotion drew the attention of the flight attendants, who rushed to assist. But just as the veteran thought he had the situation under control, the man sneered and muttered, "You think I came alone?" Before anyone could react, a second man, seated in the middle of the plane, stood up, revealing a similar device. "Nobody move," he shouted, his voice filled with menace. The cabin erupted into chaos once again, and Barron realized they weren't out of danger yet. The stakes had just been raised, and the fight to protect everyone on board was far from over. The second man's sudden appearance sent shockwaves through the cabin. Passengers froze, their fear escalating as the situation spiraled further out of control. His menacing glare swept the aisle, daring anyone to defy him. "Sit down, old man," he barked at the veteran, his voice a harsh contrast to the tension-filled silence that followed. The veteran didn't move, his hand still gripping the first man's wrist. His mind raced, calculating his next move. He knew time was critical. One wrong decision could escalate the situation into a catastrophe. Barron, however, remained steady. His gaze shifted from the second man to the passengers around him. Some were crying, others clinging to their loved ones. He could feel the weight of their fear, and it only strengthened his resolve. The second man waved his device threateningly, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "This is your last warning. If anyone tries to play hero, you'll regret it." Barron took a deep breath and stepped forward, drawing the second man's attention. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. The man sneered. "What do I want? I want people like you to understand that your privilege doesn't make you untouchable." The words hit Barron hard, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his curiosity genuine. "So, this is about teaching me a lesson? Putting everyone here in danger for that?" The man's smirk faltered for a moment before he regained his composure. "You wouldn't understand," he snapped. "None of you would." Barron's voice softened. A calculated move to de-escalate. "Maybe not, but you could explain it to me. Why go to these lengths? What's the point?" The second man hesitated, thrown off by Barron's unexpected approach. For a brief moment, his guard dropped, and the veteran saw his chance. Without warning, the veteran released the first man, who was still pinned to the seat, and lunged toward the second man. The movement was so swift and precise that it caught everyone off guard. With years of military training kicking in, he disarmed the second man in seconds, tossing the device to the floor where it skidded out of reach. The cabin erupted in cheers, but the danger wasn't over yet. The first man, now free, sprang to his feet and grabbed Barron by the arm, yanking him backward. "Stop," the man shouted, his voice desperate. "I'll take him down with me if I have to." The veteran turned, his eyes blazing with determination. "Let him go," he commanded, stepping closer. But Barron surprised everyone. Instead of struggling, he looked directly at the man and said, "You don't have to do this. Whatever you're fighting for, this isn't the way." The man's grip faltered, his expression conflicted. For a brief moment, Barron's words seemed to reach him, but the moment was fleeting, and his desperation returned. "Shut up," the man shouted, tightening his hold. "You don't know anything about me." The veteran edged closer, his voice calm but commanding. "It's over. Let the kid go before you make things worse for yourself and everyone else." Suddenly, a group of passengers, emboldened by the veteran's bravery, rose from their seats and began to surround the man. The shift in power was palpable, and the man realized he was outnumbered. His grip on Barron loosened, and the veteran seized the opportunity, pulling Barron free and shoving the man into the nearest seat. The passengers erupted in applause as flight attendants rushed in to secure the situation. Barron sat down, his heart pounding but his face calm. He looked at the veteran and said, "You really do know what you're doing." The veteran smiled faintly, his tension finally easing. "And you're braver than you look, kid." But as the plane began to stabilize, Barron couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Something about the men's motives didn't add up, and he couldn't help but wonder, who sent them and why? As the flight crew secured the two men and passengers gradually returned to their seats, an uneasy calm settled over the cabin. Whispers rippled through the rows, speculating about the attackers' motives and marveling at the bravery of Barron and the veteran. Yet, beneath the surface of relief, Barron felt a growing sense of unease. He glanced at the veteran, who was watching the restrained men with an intensity that suggested he shared the same doubts. "Something's off," Barron murmured, leaning closer. "This wasn't random." The veteran nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the men. These guys didn't seem like amateurs. They were too coordinated. And that speech about privilege, it felt rehearsed. Barron's mind raced as he replayed the events. The second man's words, his focus on Barron, the pointed way he had spoken about privilege, it all pointed to a deliberate act. But what was the real purpose? Before he could voice his thoughts, a flight attendant approached, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Trump," she said softly, "the captain wants to speak with you. He's in the cockpit." Barron exchanged a glance with the veteran, who gave a subtle nod of encouragement. Rising from his seat, Barron followed the attendant, his heart pounding with anticipation. The cockpit door closed behind him, and the captain turned, his expression grim. "Mr. Trump, I thought you should know we've received a message from air traffic control." Barron stiffened. "What kind of message?" The captain handed him a slip of paper. The handwriting was shaky, as if written in haste. "This isn't over. The real lesson begins when you land." Barron stared at the note, his mind reeling. "Who sent this?" The captain shook his head. "We're not sure. It was transmitted just after the incident started. Security on the ground has been notified, and they're preparing for your arrival." Barron's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on the cockpit door. The attendant opened it, revealing the veteran. "I thought you might need backup," he said, stepping inside. The captain filled him in, and the veteran's face darkened. "This confirms it," he said. "They weren't just targeting the plane, they were targeting you, Barron." "But why?" Barron asked, his frustration mounting. "Why me? What do they want?" The veteran folded his arms, his military instincts kicking in. "They want to make a statement. And you're the perfect target, young, influential and polarizing. They're trying to use you to send a message." Barron felt a chill run down his spine. The gravity of the situation was sinking in, but he refused to let fear take over. "So what do we do?" The veteran's expression softened. "We stay vigilant. We land, cooperate with security, and figure out who's behind this. And whatever happens, we don't let them win." As the plane began its descent, Barron returned to his seat, his mind racing with possibilities. The passengers were calm, reassured by the veteran's presence and the crew's professionalism, but Barron couldn't shake the weight of the note in his pocket. The city lights sparkled below as the plane approached the runway. Barron tightened his seatbelt, his heart pounding with a mix of apprehension and determination. Whatever awaited him on the ground, he knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The wheels touched down smoothly, but the tension in the air was palpable. Barron glanced at the veteran, who gave him a reassuring nod. "We'll face it together," the older man said quietly. As the plane taxied to the gate, Barron braced himself for what was to come. The note's ominous promise echoed in his mind, but he was ready. No matter what lay ahead, he wasn't going to back down. The plane door opened, revealing a flood of flashing lights and uniformed officers waiting on the tarmac. The scene was chaotic, reporters shouting questions, security personnel forming a tight perimeter, and passengers being escorted off the plane in a methodical but urgent manner. Barron Trump stepped out, flanked by the veteran and several agents who had boarded the plane immediately upon landing. The weight of the note in his pocket felt heavier with every step he took. "Mr. Trump, this way," one of the agents directed, guiding him toward an armored SUV parked near the edge of the tarmac. Barron's mind raced as he climbed in, the veteran sliding in beside him. Inside the vehicle, a high-ranking official greeted them with a grim expression. "Mr. Trump, we've analyzed the situation. The men on the plane are part of a coordinated effort. Their goal wasn't just to disrupt the flight, it was to draw you out, to make you a symbol in a larger agenda." Barron furrowed his brow. "A symbol of what?" The official hesitated. "Division. They wanted to use your name, your family's legacy, to stoke further unrest. But there's more. They've left clues suggesting this is far from over." The veteran leaned forward. "Clues? What kind of clues?" The official handed them a tablet displaying grainy surveillance footage. It showed a group of people in a dimly lit room assembling what looked like propaganda materials. Maps, photographs of Barron, and cryptic symbols were pinned to a wall. "This group has been planning for months," the official explained. "They're highly organized, and they've been watching you closely. We believe their next move will be even more public and dangerous." Barron's chest tightened, but he refused to let fear take hold. "So what's the plan?" The veteran placed a reassuring hand on Barron's shoulder. "We fight back, but not with fear or retaliation, with action and truth. If they're trying to use you to divide, we'll turn it on them. We'll unite people instead." Barron nodded, the fire in his eyes growing. "Let's do it. Tell me what I need to do." The SUV sped away, heading toward a secure location where Barron could regroup and plan his next steps. As they drove, the veteran shared his own story, his struggles as a young soldier, the battles he fought, and the lessons he learned about courage and resilience. "You have a voice, Barron," he said. "And more importantly, you have the power to bring people together. Don't let them take that away from you." Hours turned into days as Barron and a team of advisors worked tirelessly to counter the group's narrative. Social media posts, interviews, and public appearances highlighted messages of unity, compassion, and resilience. The veteran became a trusted ally, joining Barron at every turn, sharing his own journey to inspire others. When the group attempted another public stunt, they were met not with chaos but with overwhelming support for Barron's message. People from all walks of life rallied together, proving that the attackers' agenda of division had backfired spectacularly. Months later, Barron sat with the veteran on the steps of a community center they had helped rebuild together. The once quiet young man had grown into a confident and determined leader, his experiences shaping him into someone who understood the power of his platform. "You didn't just give up a first-class seat," the veteran said with a smile. "You gave people hope, and that's something no one can take away." Barron looked out at the crowd gathered to celebrate their efforts, a mix of faces young and old, united by a shared belief in something greater. He smiled, knowing that in the face of fear and division, he had chosen to stand tall. And as the sun set on the horizon, Barron Trump realized that this was only the beginning of his story, a story of resilience, unity, and the power to make a difference, no matter the odds.